Hey everybody, happy Sunday. Um, for once, we have a live view of something to look at. This is the Artemis II vehicle out on Launch Pad 39B. This is the NASA live stream that they're providing right now, but of course you can find it on uh, other YouTube channels, some of the uh, some of the media sites out there, like NASASpaceflight.com, NSF, Spaceflight Now. I'm sure they all have something like this. Um, so what I thought I would do today is mostly take questions, but I'll just go ahead and off the top. There's not, if you've been following the NASA rolled the vehicle out to the pad yesterday. It was a little bit, it was kind of like this at the beginning of the day, but then there was some what I would call marine layer I'm from the Los Angeles area, which burned off mid morning, and so there were some really pretty pictures, and I think NASA's posted a few of those, and you've probably seen some on social media as well. Um, but the vehicle got to the pad last night, and um, I think NASA posted on social that they got. I'm not sure if because they don't use the hard down milestone reference. I'm not. I think they said the vehicle was over the pedestals or on the pad around 6:42 p.m. Eastern. First motion was somewhere around 7:05 a.m. Eastern. But they made good time. So they reached the pad. I did a live stream for members yesterday as the vehicle reached the pad surface, and we just kind of watched as they got positioned to lower the mobile launcher down over the pedestals, and the uh, so they were assuming that that was not the hard down milestone, then they would have lowered the mobile launcher down onto the pedestals after that, and they did do that. And it's kind of hard to see here, but the mobile launcher rolled out from underneath uh, the crawler transporter rolled out from underneath the mobile launcher, crawler transporter 2, and rolled down the pad surface. Typically, they will park it outside the pad gate for a couple of days, and then maybe in the last couple of hours, maybe less than that, just recently uh, they rotated the crew access arm. They extended it up against the spacecraft, up against the launch abort system fairing. And um, okay, Dave says that that was hard down. Okay, great. So the 6:42. I'm trying to remember what time the vehicle got to the pad surface much sooner than that. Um, so that's approximately the sort of those are sort of the two major milestones that mark the rollout from first motion to hard down on the pedestals. And then as I said, the crawler repositioned down to the to the pad outside the pad gate on the crawler way, and they extended the crew access arm, and they're now going into this pad flow. It's given the lighting here and the weather conditions, we probably it will probably be difficult, at least during this part of the morning. Maybe as we get better lighting during the day. One of the other things that they will be doing is setting up the emergency egress system lines, running those up to the mobile launcher, and then running the baskets up there. And so it's kind of hard to see, but the I believe that's they're set up on the 274-foot level, which is where the white room is. So they'll run the lines up to that, connect those from the terminus area down here, way out of uh, the pad perimeter, run the lines up there, uh, and then run the four baskets up there. So four lines and then four baskets. And so they're doing that in parallel with the uh, pad. They're hooking up all the commodities to the from the pad to the mobile launcher, and they're going to then press straight into the pad validations, which is basically just verifying that all of the connections and all of the services are working as specified. And so let me see if I can pull up that little bit from the pre-rollout briefing on Friday midday. Let me see if I can pull up that clip from Charlie Blackwell Thompson. So we'll for momentarily switch away from the live view. Pardon me, my breakfast is repeating on me a little bit. Make sure I can. Let me make sure I've got the audio on.
Once we get out to the pad, we'll begin and get hard down. We'll begin our connects to the facility, connecting our commodities, getting through our validations, getting connected back up to the firing room. We'll get prepared to power up the elements. We have some crew access arm swings that are going to happen out at the pad. When we first get out there, we've got emergency egress system to configure. We'll get ready for our pad testing, which is called pad PSET. It's a lot of our RF checkouts that we do.
Sorry, let me quickly just interject. So, if you've watched the channel or watched the videos, you're familiar with some of these acronyms. Again, acronyms are shorthand. It's just easy. It's just faster to throw those out. But here we can stop. PSET stands for Program-Specific Engineering Tests, and then I'll go ahead and back up. But it's basically, she's going to talk about they're doing RF tests,
and we'll do our booster
that you
configure. We'll get ready for.
You can't do those tests inside the VAB effectively.
For our pad testing, which is called pad PSET. It's a lot of our RF checkouts that we do. And we'll do our booster servicing, and we will get ready for wet dress. We do have a walk down with the crew called CDDT Part 2. It's a walk down of the emergency egress system once it's configured. We'll take care of that somewhere in and around our preps for wet dress is the plan right now based on the crew schedule. In wet dress, we'll fully tank that vehicle. We'll go through all of our tanking ops. We'll go through our day of launch configuration, and provided everything's nominal, the launch director, myself, I'll make the decision to send the closeout crew out to the pad, and we will do the final closeouts for launch. We'll go through our terminal count, and we have a planned cutoff at T-minus 29 seconds. We'll take some time after wet dress. We'll review the data, and then we'll set up for our launch attempt. Launch day will be pretty similar to wet dress. There'll be two big differences. One is that we're going to send the crew to the pad, and the other one is we're not going to stop at 29 seconds for a planned stop. So that's a little bit about our road to wet dress, what's entailed in wet dress. Again, launch will come along after that. We talked about, I think at our prior briefing, a little bit about our countdown, leveraged off the Artemis I countdown. I do have a couple of changes in our holds in the countdown. We have 3 planned for Artemis II. Just like we do on launch.
And so she handed off to Jeff Radigan, who's the lead flight director for Artemis II there. Let me go ahead, and so I'll just bring this back up. It looks like the fog is starting to burn off a little bit out at the pad. So she talked about doing some of those engineering tests. She talked about the booster servicing, and again, that's the solid rocket booster thrust vector control system is a hydraulic system. It's the old shuttle hydraulics that were used in the orbiter and the solid rocket boosters. These solid rocket boosters use shuttle case and assembly hardware. So each booster has redundant hydraulic systems A and B, one each for a rock and a tilt thrust vector control actuator. And so this is a escape operation. It's a hazardous operation. They will clear the pad area, the immediate pad area, and a group of personnel will go up on the deck of the mobile launcher and load the hydrazine into those 4 tanks. And so the reason that's a big deal is because they pretty much are going to have to they will look to find the right place in a work shift to do that clear and do that and do that servicing. And then and so that's what we're going to be, those are some of the things we're going to be looking for here in the next week and a half, 2 weeks. And then we'll have to see what happens with the timing of the wet dress rehearsal. If you watch the briefing, we've heard a couple of dates, certainly informally, because I think that they will, if they're ready sooner, they'll do the test sooner. If they need to push it out, they'll do that as well. So the two dates that we've heard a little bit are January 31st, which was in one of those releases, I guess back a week ago, where they talked about late January. So January 31st or February 2nd, Groundhog Day, that's the date that was mentioned in the briefing. And so if the earlier they do that test, the better. Just from a schedule standpoint, it'll give them more. It'll improve the chances of making a first launch attempt, obviously based on the results and the outcome of the wet dress rehearsal. So I think right there, I'll go ahead and take questions. There's a lot of anybody who, if you have questions, please throw those in chat. If because I'm here in a hotel in the area, I don't have the sort of full complement of computers and things to sort of slice and dice the content that I got. But again, it's not. I'm not a photographer, so the pictures and the imagery that I got were just point and shoot. So I'll show some of those when I get home and in future videos. But if you guys have any questions, let me go back and look. I know there were a couple here while I was blathering. Do we know how many cameras NASA has running in the pad area on launch day? I'm not sure. I don't have even a vague count. They have probably hundreds of video cameras which are running at all times. I think during the feed from the rollout yesterday, or during the crew news conference with the NASA administrator Jared Isaacman, you saw a few of those operational TV cameras, and so they have hundreds of those. They're all over the umbilical tower. They're around the pad infield, pad perimeter. Those are all operating all the time. And then they have a set of engineering film cameras that they're configured to record the launch, especially the launch that way. So, I mean, I would imagine there are certainly scores of those cameras as well. Not just, and in that case, you also have a complement of TV cameras as well, video cameras as well. So it not just short range, but also long range cameras, cameras that are in the vicinity of the pad, and then all the way out to the eastern test range. So there are typically cameras that are positioned down in the Cocoa Beach area, in the Port Canaveral area to the south, and then also to the north in the Playa Linda area. They will have tracking cameras that are also set up there. So everything in that range from maybe 25-mile radius around Cape Canaveral Space Force Station to, they have cameras in the flame hole around the solid rocket booster, vehicle support posts. So they have cameras that are looking at the engines during startup. They have cameras looking at all of the umbilical plates as those disengage after the vehicle starts to move. So they have a lot of cameras, and we'll see how long it takes for them to review all of that and approve that for publication, because it took several months to do that after Artemis I. So we'll just have to see what we get live, and we'll have to see what we get well, to see what we get, um, how long it takes after the mission. So um, somebody asking about the NASA Ground Sys social media account. That's maybe I don't know if you recall, but if you remember, I believe it was last year. Um, you know, NASA went through, just like all of the government agencies went through, a cost cutting. Um, um, there was a cost cutting policy instituted across all of the executive branch government programs. And so one of the things that they identified was what they considered to be a redundant social media accounts. And so that's one of the ones that got cut out. So they eliminated all of the uh, Artemis program level accounts. So Exploration Ground Systems, Orion, SLS, HLS, and so on. And I think they tried to restrict that down to just the centers, which there's, approximately, I think there's approximately a dozen, give or take 10 or thereabouts, the individual NASA centers, and then, some of the um, leadership. So obviously the administrator, and some of the things like that. But I think, there are arguments for and against it. It was that account was, um, I'd say the advantage of having a more specific account was that you could scope things based on, things were scoped based on, in the case of NASA ground systems, then these types of operations would be in one place, versus if you're talking about Kennedy Space Center, then you're talking about a much broader scope of activities: commercial crew, deep space logistics, um, payloads, launch services program. Those are not necessarily, they're not directly related to Artemis. And so it's kind of the same thing as what it's kind of the difference between what I'm doing here on this channel, which is I'm focused specifically on Artemis, versus um, you know something like NASAspaceflight.com. They're looking at the industry in a much broader sense. So it isn't just Artemis 2. It's, again, it's Starship, it's Falcon, it's commercial industry, it's spacecraft, it's um, ground systems, but not focused on Artemis. And so there are definitely pros and cons. There's definitely, this administration is, has that philosophy of um, less is more. I think it's fair to say that that's the case sometimes. I don't know. I'm not a big personal fan of a one size fits all approach. So I don't think less is more is always the case. So, and I think maybe in this case, you could make the argument that it doesn't really matter that much. I think the issue isn't so much um, the channels, as much as the amount of content provided by those different social media channels. So um, we're just not getting, it's something that I've noted over and over, is that the amount of content released by the programs has gotten more and more narrow. It's mostly restricted now to visual information. So we get a lot of this, but we don't necessarily get a lot of details um, about what's happening from day to day. So, um, and that's where we come in. Us evil media types, we're going to be asking about. We're going to be asking to get as much of that information as we can. So, um, let me go back and see. Um, yeah, somebody's asking about the crew access arm. It's kind of hard to see. Let me see if I can go back. It was sometime after daybreak they extended it, so it is extended. It's up against the it's up against the LAS ogive. But if you sort of go back, if you go back in the stream, again, foggy, but you could see. So here, so again, I'm just going. But this is back about an hour, 70 minutes. So you can see now. You can't see it. It was fully retracted, and then you can see it there. they're swinging it out, they're extending it out up against the vehicle. So that was let me see if I so again that's about 65 minutes ago approximately is somewhere around there. So and so yeah, and then and as Charlie Blackwell Thompson said in that little bit of the press conference, they're going to be doing some swing tests. That is one of the major differences between Artemis 1 and Artemis 2 is that they need to have a fully functional crew access arm, because obviously crew is going to be on board and they have to be able to support. Um, they have to be ready in case there is some sort of an emergency. So we're talking about the emergency egress system. Well, it doesn't really do anybody any good if you can't get from the crew module over, back to the umbilical tower. So in an emergency or in a in a situation where they need the arm to be extended very quickly from fully retracted to fully extended, that's something that they will be testing again. So they made a bunch of upgrades to the hydraulics. That's again a hydraulic system that extends that arm. They upgraded the hydraulics for that from between Artemis 1 and Artemis 2. They tested that significantly, quite a bit when the mobile launcher was out of the pad by itself, which was uh, August 2023 to somewhere, was it October 2024? It was out of the pad for a significant amount of time, and that was one of the things that they were testing. So the question is, does the crew have any means to look outside during launch? It's very similar to Apollo. The launch abort system, as launch abort system, is both an abort system and it is the crew module payload fairing, so to speak. It's half of the fairing for Orion. There's a set of service module fairing panels that are around that encapsulate the service module, and then the launch abort system ogive fairing encapsulates the crew module. There is a window in the launch abort system hatch, and so similar to the boost protective cover for the Apollo launch escape system, there's one window, and so the crew's looking out of Orion's windows, and I'm not sure, I'm not sure. Maybe both of the pilots, the commander and the pilot, are closest to the windows, and so they should have some sight line through through the Orion windows and then out to the launch abort system hatch window. Let's see. So there's a question about the Artemis 3 crew makeup. Um, I don't think there have been um, if I recall correctly, there was some sort of an announcement about that the first European crew member would be, um, you have a Canadian flying on Artemis 2, that the first European crew member would be, I believe would be German, but I don't I'm not recalling whether that was, whether that the ESA has a seat on Artemis 3. It could just be the first, uh, whichever Artemis mission is the first mission with an ESA astronaut. The that he or she will be a will be German, but I don't know if it's been really clearly spelled out, what the makeup of the Artemis 3 crew will be. So so then the obvious question is, what's the launch date, and that is to be determined, by the, um, again, I can't clip it right here, but the if you watched the I didn't get a chance to watch the crew news conference because there was a big crowd around the stage there, and a long line to ask questions, and so I decided, because the sun had come out and the vehicle, it was very picturesque. The vehicle rolling by. I didn't go out to the crawler way, but there were some really cool views, and so I decided, after a quick chat with the backup crew members, Andre Douglas and Jenny Gibbons were there, and they were in their blue flight suits, but they didn't get to go up on stage. So I just quickly asked Jenny if why they weren't up there, and she said, "Well, we're backup crew, so to speak." I'm paraphrasing, of course. But I took pictures, and so I watched that this morning, and I I believe Jared Isaacman said something to the extent that they're not going to assign a launch date. They aren't going to pick a specific day until after the wet dress rehearsal, which is which is kind of a bummer, because I know a lot of you. I've heard more than once about, how problematic it is, and I know because I'm trying to plan travel as well, how problematic it is to try and plan travel when you don't know the specific date. I know some people have the luxury of being able to, they don't have to have exact dates. If you've ever planned travel that way, that's obviously a somewhat of a luxury, but most people don't, and so it really makes a difference if it makes a difference if to know to have a particular date. And then on top of that, really, I think the dimension that is the most unfortunate is the amount of notice that's going to be given. So that if that really is the case, then everyone is going to get, a few days of notice, and so um, obviously everybody is kind of trying to figure out how to game that out, and so we don't have a we don't have a specific date. What I will tell you is we have a cut. We have, I wouldn't call it a range, but we've heard a couple of dates for the wet dress rehearsal, and we've heard a couple of dates for the first launch opportunity. And I'll and the date. So the wet dress rehearsal dates that we've heard were, we heard January 31st and February 2nd, Groundhog Day. And apologies if I'm repeating this, but it's probably worth repeating anyway. And then we've heard um, February 6th, which is the first um, lunar opportunity, and we've also heard February 8th as a that depending on how long it takes them to get to the wet dress rehearsal and actually conduct it, and um, and then how much time it takes to either to review the data and fix anything that needs to be fixed, um, that you could have, it could be somewhere in there. And then again, the bigger picture is they're constrained to 5 consecutive nights in early February for this launch period 17. So even though the opening of the launch window, pardon me, is um, um, it crosses into midnight on the night of the ninth. You really have the nights of the 6th, 7th, 8th, ninth, and 10th. And as you get to the ninth and 10th, the actual launch window opens after midnight. So it'd be after midnight on the 10th and after midnight on the 11th. But um, just in terms of what that means, um, and so if if they were able to get to the wet dress rehearsal by, the end of January, then that will give them a little bit more. It just gives them more time to be able to handle any issues, to fix anything that they need to fix before they get to the 6th. And um, I asked, we got a chance to talk to one of the leadership with the Exploration Systems Development Mission Director, which is again, as I say all the time, Artemis is a brand name. You don't see any Artemis line items in the budget. It's technically is not the right word, but it's in the contracts, so to speak. It's called the Exploration Directorate, and so I'll use that interchangeably from time to time. So, but anyway, we heard from one of the leaders. Her name's Lakeisha Hawkins. You may have seen her if you watch the briefings in Houston. And I was trying to get a sense of, would they take, in an extreme case where they, for instance, uh, only got, let's say for some reason they finished all of their work and they ended up where they could take one launch opportunity, like let's say that night of the 10th again. Would they do that? Would they consider that valuable enough to make one try, um, in the launch period if it got to that? Versus if you have 5 consecutive days, then you could probably make, you have at least the possibility of being able to make as many as 3 launch attempts, which is, again, gives you more flexibility in case the weather is crappy on the, one of those days, or more than one of those days. So, um, or you have an issue that you can resolve within those 5 days. Um, so we'll just have to see how, we'll have to see where how things go in terms of the pad flow, in terms of all of this work that they need to do. Um, so those are the kinds of things, So today I would expect them to be working on, doing we might see the crew access arm. I don't know if they're talking about doing those swings, um, uh, doing swing testing as early as today, but we did, obviously, since the arm's been extended, that means they've got the hydraulics hooked up to the mobile launcher, if not all of the other things. And so they're talking about, getting all the pad hookups done, getting the vehicle systems powered up. So you've got the main flight computers the SLS main flight computers are in the core stage, the ICPS flight computers, and then Orion flight computers, and then you have avionics that are hanging off of those three. In particular, the Orion and the core stage flight computers. You've got the solid rocket booster avionics. You've got the um, all of the Orion avionics that are in the crew module adapter, the European service module. So they will power all those up, make sure everything's still working after they rolled out to the pad. And we should also then, we wouldn't be able to see that necessarily, other than we are seeing indications that they've got the hydraulics up to extend the arm. But we also, maybe as we're starting to see the sun burn off the haze, it's not, or the marine layer again, maybe we will see, we'll get, with the sun angles, we'll get a sense of working on running those emergency egress system lines for the baskets up to the top of the tower. Um, but those are the kinds of things we would be looking for here, um, in the next day or so. And then when they get into, we won't be able to see, I don't think we'll necessarily be able to tell when they do the pad clear and do the booster servicing, but that's also another big milestone, just to just to get that done. So um, yeah, they aren't, I think Jared Isaacman said something to the effect of zero chance of announcing a launch date before the wet dress rehearsal, and that's fair. But again, we have this issue of, if the wet dress rehearsal was on February 2nd, and it would, the night of February 2nd, and the first launch attempt was the night of February 6th. That's not a lot of time to make travel plans, or to even to change travel plans. It is possible to do, but it's also, as I've had some experience with making late changes to travel plans in the last week or so, and probably will see more of that. Also very expensive. In some cases, it doubles the cost or worse. So all sorts of fun. And so again, I don't know what the, I don't know what the alternative is to that, but um, I think, in the name of giving us some sense without setting a date, one of the things that they could do is to just provide a, I don't know, I can tell you what I would like, which would be a daily update on how far they are. So again, I know it's a Sunday, so maybe they don't have to do it today, but it'd be nice if they could say, you know, on Monday, okay, here's how far we've got. Here's at the very least, here's how far we got. Here's what's next. When are we doing? When are they doing the pad P sets? When are they going to do the booster servicing? And so we can get a feel for, if they don't, without giving us a date, they can give us information that will give us a feel for how well they're tracking within the pad preparations, without giving us a date for either the wet dress rehearsal or launch. And so I, that would that would unfortunately be, uh, that would be against character, over the last several years. They're, again, pet peeve of mine. They tend to be, they tend to be less expressive than more expressive. And so, yeah, it's one of those sources of frustration. So, um, yeah, somebody's noting in chat or asking sort of rhetorically, isn't it more difficult to keep the range clear? Um, well, and then that's a good point. So they will have to reserve dates. I think what's going to happen though is, so again, as you know, for those of you who are familiar with, again, watching NSF all the time, SpaceX is launching Falcon 9s all the time, because they have an autonomous flight termination system. Though it doesn't require as much range, um, interaction, and so, in generally speaking, they should be able to continue their launch operations. They may only have to stand down for, um, if there are any operations on 39A, which I believe that's not the case. They're doing most of their operations, or all of their operations, on pad 40 right now. Um, and so that's far enough away from 39B where there wouldn't necessarily be um, any issues in terms of holding up, Falcon operations, the SLS tanking stuff. But, um, they will have to put out all of the notices to marine activity and all of the notices to air activity, and they will have to reserve dates on the range. And so we will hear about that. And so that's a good point, which is, um, they may have all of those reservations, reserving dates on the range, a primary launch date, a backup launch date, perhaps a second, a tertiary launch opportunity date. But then they're gonna, um, and so that, I know that the folks that track Starship on a daily basis, they watch those when they get close to a flight test. They watch those NOTAMs and other, um, notices that go out to, air and, sea traffic. And so that will be something that people are already paying attention to. But, um, it's going to come down to, uh, what happens when they do it, the outcome of the wet dress rehearsal, and then they're planning on holding the final flight readiness review, the agency level flight readiness review, after the wet dress rehearsal, even if they're going to try and compress that down to a 4-day interval. Um, we'll see. Um, let's see. I'll just go. I'll just take. Let me make sure I didn't. Let me make sure I didn't miss something. Uh, okay. So the the next question was, how soon can they try to launch again after a scrubbed launch attempt? There was some text in the SLS reference guide that I thought sounded different than my original understanding, and I tried to get a clarification on that. And sort of it sounds like, I guess, and I'll just go with it. It sounds like my earlier understanding is still correct. I can't bring that graphic up here. What they have the ability to make, purely from a, liquid hydrogen, liquid oxygen commodity standpoint, they have the ability to make, 4 launch attempts within 6 days. Now, as we were just talking about, they don't have that many opportunities um, in February. They only have 5 consecutive days, and um, so the way that they're set up, and this will, this is I'll, the baseline, because there's a lot of different tangents that you can go off of that. The baseline is they can do a 24-hour scrub turnaround from launch attempt 1 to launch attempt 2, and then if they're still not off the pad by that point, then they could turn around 48 hours after the second attempt, and then 48 hours after the third attempt. And so that gives them the ability to do, again, like I said, 4 launch attempts within 6 days. What what um, but you could see some variation on that, because just like anybody that follows launches, um, you don't necessarily scrub for only for weather, um, and so if there's an issue that causes them to scrub a launch attempt, um, that's obviously the first question is when are you going to make the next attempt? If it's weather, then it's possible then that they can just turn around in 24 hours. If it's if it's not just weather, but it's some sort of a technical issue, can they resolve it in 24 hours? If they can, then they can try and make a second attempt 24 hours after the first one. But for example, and I don't want to, I won't beat a dead horse with this, but let's say that they had an issue that required them to take an extra day after the first attempt. Um, the that 4 attempts in 6 days is based on commodities. If they had an extra day, they might choose to go back in and replenish the hydrogen spheres in particular. And you can see down here in the very lower part of the view, that's the new. I want to say it's one and a quarter million gallons, and apologies for using those units, but those are the units that they typically would use. um, I think again, and I don't quote me exactly, but it's something over, it has a capacity somewhere over 1 million gallons of liquid hydrogen. They have 2 of those, and that coupled with the original sphere, which has a capacity of a usable capacity of somewhere around 700,000 gallons, gives them this capability. It actually would give them the capability, in theory, to do 3 launch attempts in a row, 3 attempts in 3 days. It's just that if you look at some of the times here, these are all going to be overnight launches. And if you've ever tried to sleep shift, there's only so much that you can do, especially when you can ask maybe, half a dozen people to sleep shift, and it maybe be, uh, that's one thing. Asking 1,000 people, 1,500 people to sleep shift, and have them all be relatively, more or less as effective as normal, is maybe a little bit of a bigger ask. And so they aren't planning on doing 3 in a row. I have heard some, you know, that's one of those contingencies that I would wonder if they're thinking about now, because they only have so many opportunities in February, where if they get down to the last 3 days, would they, it isn't even that. It's, is that, how much of a possibility is that? Would they start thinking about, could we support something like that? Given that we're talking about a tight window to begin with. I mean, today's the 18th, um, February 10th, the night of the 10th or the 11th, if you want to use that. That's only really, what, 3 weeks away approximately. So what, 13 days left in January, and so it's a little more than 3 weeks, but 3.5 weeks. The window, the February launch opportunity ends in less than about 3 weeks from now. So they have to get all of this work done, including the tanking test, and then finish the final preparations, um, and make launch attempts and get all of that done in the next approximately 3 weeks. So not a lot of time. Um, so yeah, there's a question about the crew access arm going back yesterday at rollout. if you were watching if you're watching one of the live streams, they started retracting it slowly, and then they stopped, and then and then actually went back in the opposite direction. I think, as somebody was saying in chat, it probably wasn't an issue. It's again, they're doing tests of the hydraulics for this system, and it's possible that that was a test. Pardon me, I don't know for sure, but what we did see, pardon me again, is uh, they it came back a little bit, so they were retracting it. They moved in the other direction a little bit, and then they did a relatively fast retraction of the arm, from where it was, and so that I don't know that that necessarily means there was an issue there. So um, yeah, and so as I was saying, there's just not enough clearance in the vehicle assembly building, and so um, the the they have when it is outside, it's generally not. Let me back up. Not when it's outside. When they're rolling, it generally tends to need to be retracted and locked up against the umbilical tower for structural support. When it is inside, it needs to be extended because there's just not enough room. You can't the arc that it describes would there's not enough clearance inside the VAB to do that without um, coming into significant contact with structure. So they when they get right up to the door, when they're rolling back, either with or without a vehicle, they have to extend it almost all the way, if not all the way, to fully extended, and then go inside. So um, the question about when will the crew enter quarantine? Um, I'm not sure, but I did ask. I spoke with the lead for the closeout crew on Friday, Taylor Hose, and uh, um, he said because they have to go into a kind of quarantine. It's not the same as the crew, um, but he said L minus 14, which I obviously means L minus 14 days. So that's probably certainly in either exact or in the ballpark. So a couple of weeks before the launch, and so here we are with this sort of this is the game that we're playing. So the crew is going to be set up, and everybody is going to be set up. And I was just talking about sleep shifting. I'm sure people are going to be sleep shifting as much as they can, and so everybody, all the people and all the teams are going to set up for that February for those February windows, the nights of the 6th through the nights of the 10th, and those the launch windows open close around midnight. They a little before midnight, a little after midnight Eastern time, and so and the thing is that and if I recall correctly, Victor Glover said the crew wakes up about 7 hours before the window. He didn't say before the window opens. He just says sort of euphemistically before launch, but um, so they're getting up mid afternoon, and uh, um, so that's when their day's starting, and then they would go 16 hours. They'd go essentially two shifts on, and then they get one shift, a sleep period, which is a full shift. So that's they're going to be doing that, and they're going to they're getting ready to go in in early February, but we're not going to necessarily get we're not going to we're going to continue to sort of play this cat and mouse game of what's the date, ask me again. So that's the way this is going to be going, um, certainly for the next 2 weeks or so. And then I mean, and to be fair, it does come down to the wet dress rehearsal, but there's only so much there's only so many dates that it could be on, and so um, the more information, the more context that they provide, the better it would be, I think. and at least let people make an informed choice about travel plans, for instance. Um, and so, because I know it's frustrating. It's frustrating to be out there and to have a launch be scrubbed, but I also know it's maybe worse to have plans to go see something and then have it moved up so that you're caught out and they launch before you can get out there. That could be frustrating, and just not being, just not just being out of the loop and not getting any information is just frustrating. So I understand that. I definitely understand that. Um, so yeah, the crew, the um, the crew goes when the crew goes into quarantine. He was saying the closeout crew lead was saying, Taylor Hose was saying that they're going to be in crew quarters at both in Houston and at the Kennedy Space Center, and so they will have, I would say, much more strict controls in terms of access to them once that begins. And then the folks like the closeout crew will be in a kind of quarantine where they have to, they have to socially distance. They essentially have to go through the COVID protocols that we all had to go through. What is it, 5 years ago, more than 5 years ago now? Um, and so, again, just to avoid passing something along when you're in a time crunch. That and so that's uh, that's where we are right now. And so um, let's see if so. Oops, that's not what I want to do. Is there any other questions? Let me see if I can. No, I don't have that picture handy. I will, once I get home. I will put together. I want to put together something to kind of go over the, um, some of the things, some of the people that I spoke with. I got a chance to do a couple of interviews, but for the most part, this was about the rollout event itself, and there weren't this wasn't this is they're going to provide more subject matter experts when they get close to launch. So a few days before launch, they're planning on providing um, more people for us to talk to get some additional background, and so hopefully I can bring some of that to you. Um, and so I'm gonna definitely take this experience home and try and have some more try and have some more maybe a little bit more flexibility in terms of publishing things while I am on the road, so to speak. So, um, question about the NSF channel. I did do a little bit of commentary yesterday during the early part of the role, but it it um, it was a little it got a little bit difficult to do because again these are the sort of things I need to take away. These are the kinds of things that the NSF broadcast team they have tons of experience with this, so they know what to do in terms of things like keeping your phone charged. So if you're if I was out, I stayed about I stayed in the press site area because I wanted to see. I'd had the experience of going out to the crawlerway and from where we were allowed to see the rollout last time. You're basically looking at the bat. You're looking at the umbilical tower, and it obscures the view of the vehicle. And so I wanted to see at least some of the vehicle as it came out. And of course, NSF had cameras showing both of those vantage points. So but I chose to stay in that area, and then I walked over to the countdown clock area to get shots, and that's then and there was the view from the parking lot at the press site was pretty spectacular once the vehicle got kind of out in front, and you could see it kind of from this angle, except on the other side. So this is we're looking we're looking to the let's see, would this be somewhat to the northeast? So the vehicle is positioned on the pad uh, the pad, the flame trench for the pad, and this is running north and south. So the umbilical tower is to the north and the vehicle's to the south, and so um, the idea is the whole heads down thing that they've done with shuttle and I believe with Apollo and also with Orion is the windows face uh, on the pad. The windows face to the south, um, and so that you're like that, and so um, and then the hatch, the hatch is on the other side. But um, we got a pretty good look at the vehicle. In some respects, you're almost too close. If you get really close to it, it's just it basically obscures itself. It's so big, it's hard to you can't get the whole you can't get the whole thing in frame, even with a wide angle lens, and so it's kind of it wasn't necessarily a bad thing, especially when there's tons of pictures of certainly on either on social media or coming from NASA from up close, and then some of these ones in the distance. So, but the problem for me in terms of being on the live stream with NSF was my phone battery died, and it was a little chilly, so yeah, I just need to be better. I need to have a little bit more provisions to do that. And then this was also something where if we were doing, for instance, for a wet dress rehearsal, or if we're covering a launch attempt, it's in a way it's more convenient to be able to just sit down at a desk and provide, and there I have more access to. I get um, more information in my ear, or on a computer screen in terms of from the production crew. I get more information. I can pick up feeds from online, and so hopefully this one, the vehicle is in motion, and so we're constantly repositioning to get different angles on it. In the case of where it is now, it's stationary until this vehicle heads to the moon. It's going to be stationary at the pad, so it's a little bit different, where they're setting up. They already have a stage set up in the press site outside. I think that's either for NASA or one of the big broadcast uh, broadcast crews. Um, but if I can do some commentary, I will. I think one of the things yesterday, and if you're watching that, I mean, this to me, this my channel is about going down rabbit holes. That's probably not such a great idea for the NSF streams. It's a little bit, the audiences overlap, but there's a little bit more, um, especially for a live event like that. It's harder to get into the nitty gritty, um, because it's a timed exercise, and so I need to be more cognizant of the fact that I can't go into details when I'm doing a live stream like that one. This is the place. This is the place where we can do that. We there we're this is not we're not in a countdown situation yet, so um, we're not necessarily listening to any play-by-play, although that would certainly be interesting. Um, but um, let's see if there's any. So yeah, if you guys have any other questions, go ahead and throw those in chat. Otherwise, um, we can start to wrap up. I hopefully will be able to do more of these. I can do some with do member live streams a little bit more frequently, and so if you're interested in joining the channel, I'm doing those a little bit more frequently. I can. It's a little easier to run some of the content in there, and so I'm trying to do a little bit of that as I can. But I will also be producing, putting together some edited video, hopefully, well, definitely when I get back. And, but there isn't a lot of time left until even 2 weeks isn't a lot of time for anybody. it takes a little while to put those together. And so, I mean, today's the 18th. I've been publishing on, um, yeah, I've been publishing on, generally publishing on Sundays. Goes usually members get to see the video um, um, on Saturday, and then it goes public on Sunday. But I mean, there's isn't it, let's see, January 31st would be Saturday. I believe that's a Saturday night, and so there's not as much opportunities because we're getting into a very compressed timeline to do. It's, as I was telling the members in one of these videos, it's 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 not as focused or as succinct as an edited video, but it's easier to put together. It's easier to just do a live stream and just give you an information dump, even if it's not succinct, than to try and produce, script out and record an edited video. Even though they're, those I think are more effective in a broader sense than these live streams. But yeah, I got the, you know, um, somebody talking about Alex on NSF. Alex is cool. Um, you know, I think I'm probably more I'm probably more long-winded than Alex, than even Alex. And I think Alex has been on so many live streams now. I think he's just gotten a lot. He's a lot better at um, explaining something in, giving you all the details, but also um, keeping it short. I'm not I don't have that kind of I don't have that kind of discipline yet. So the yeah, exactly, that I haven't been on a lot of live streams on NSF in a while, but yeah, you will see Philip answers over there. Um, and then usually what'll happen is that um, like yesterday, um, I gave one of those answers, and Chris is smacking me in the back room because it's like, not literally, but Chris is like, that was way too long. So um, let's see. There was a question that went by there. Oh, right, the question about why are they not performing a static fire? It's this is the this is the old school way of doing things where um, well, I mean, one of the reasons is they don't it takes a lot longer to recycle this vehicle once you fire it. So if they were to have a pad aboard, if the engines were to start on this vehicle and then shut down, you'd be looking at that would kick them out of whatever launch opportunity, whatever monthly launch opportunity they were in, and they'd have to go to the next one at the very least. So so there's that. Um, and because of the way that again, the way they design these are designed, um, this is supposed to be a finished product. And again, I'm euphemizing again. So this is again, this is to try not to be too much of a Philip answer, but this is supposed to be more or less a finished product, which they've now launched once. They've made a few adjustments, but these are relatively small scale adjustments. So for instance, for SLS, they added, if you've seen the pictures of the strakes that they added around the forward solid rocket booster to core stage attach points, because they had an issue in the transonic region. They had higher vibrations due to transonic buffet there. So they added strakes. They made some changes to software to change the booster separation timer that gets triggered when the booster chamber pressure hits a certain point. It's the same point in shuttle. So when the booster chamber pressure hits 50 pounds per square inch, that starts a timer to the separation of the boosters, because now they're basically just dead weight. So they made an adjustment to the length of that timer. Probably made some even more esoteric adjustments to the timing of the uh, um, shutdown sequence for the core stage engines, because they cut off a fraction of a second earlier, I think, than they wanted to. And so there are little things like that, but Um, things like the main propulsion system for the core stage, the obviously the RS-25 engines. Um, the way they're designed is that once you verify that the design works, as long as you don't make a lot of changes to it or no changes, certainly design standpoint, then um, you don't you don't necessarily need to do anything except fuel it and launch it. Which is it's interesting given how infrequently this vehicle launches, but that's the philosophy, as opposed to if you tried to do the level of changes that SpaceX is doing with the Starship design, for instance. it just it's just I guess again it would this is just my opinion, but it's incompatible with the philosophy used here. Every time, so making a change uh, to this vehicle and this design has a bigger penalty than a philosophy where you are constantly rapidly evolving your design. And so change is a foundation of what they're doing. Now, having said that, there are you will eventually get into trade-offs with that type of philosophy as well. So, but they're not going to do static fire on the pad unless they end up doing one unintentionally. So let's see, was there anything else here? So somebody's mentioning about unex- unexpected SRB combustion. The the SRB nozzles have a throat plug in them, and so that is which they've had since shuttle, and so that wouldn't be a that's what that's there for. It's to protect the solid fuel from um, not just um, a flammability risk before you start the motors themselves, but also to keep uh, debris out of there, to keep water out of there. So in addition to having some free hydrogen and something burning the engines before the boosters are ignited, you also have a lot of water that's thrown around all over the mobile launcher deck and in the flame hole. So there's a lot of water there as well, and which you don't necessarily need inside the um, inside the inside the booster itself and in contact with the solid fuel. So there if there is a small risk, it's a very small risk. It's something that they account for. So then the throat plugs being one of them. There's also a thermal curtain, which is more of a TPS thing, but then again, all of the areas have that same RTV stuff. Um, but again, like this, the accidental SRB combustion. There's an old 19 mid 1980s movie that threw around a. They used it, I think, as I guess I would call it a fictional device. I don't know that it actually would that the risk of it was real, but they visualized it, and so I think people have taken away too much from that. I think the movie was called Space Camp. Um, so I don't think that I yeah I would need to see something to back up that assertion. Um, so yeah, again, let's see the I don't know. I because I've been covering the rollout, I don't know. Kevin's asking about when the president will sign the minibus that includes the NASA budget. So I haven't had a chance to take a look and see. Um, that actually wouldn't have been a horrible question to ask unless they haven't done it yet. But that will be something that NASA leadership will know relatively quickly, and so hopefully we'll get some sort of a notification, and the people that are following that in Washington will probably get that quicker than we will. But um, I don't think I don't think it has support, as you say. It's veto proof, but more importantly, what that means is that it's something that the White House and the Senate Republicans would have negotiated, not just not just the negotiations between the House and the Senate, but also with the White House. And so, it wouldn't make a lot of sense to veto it at this point, because it's just you're just it's an odd time to fight a battle, especially when you have there are other priorities besides even this minibus, and so it's not the greatest way to do negotiations in general. So it's just a question of when we find out whether when the bill's signed. Um, so the question: do you think NASA will rebuild ML1 to be compatible with Block 1B or Block 2? Um, I would say I think the answer hasn't changed a lot, which is there are no plans to do that. It doesn't mean that they wouldn't want to, but it's just too expensive. I think there was a plan. I mean, going all the way back to when Mobile Launcher 2 was first funded, they said they would attempt to reconfigure Mobile Launcher 1 if the money was available. But so they already knew at that point that it wasn't a done deal that they would be able to um, that they'd be able to convert it to Block 1. There were some plans talking about the idea of converting it to a Block 1B cargo, a launcher to support that. But there are other um, restrictions on the infrastructure at Kennedy Space Center. So you don't um, there's not a lot of reason to have two active mobile launchers if you don't have the ability to stack two vehicles at the same time. And so you obviously would need two mobile launchers to do that, but you would also need two integration cells in the vehicle assembly building. For shuttle, they used High Bay 3 and High Bay 1, and they only ever refurbished High Bay 3 for SLS. So High Bay 1 is available, oddly enough, High Bay 1 is still available 15 years after shuttle retired, but nobody has ever come up with the money to refurbish that high bay, which is an odd thing. Because I don't know how much money it is, but it's one of those examples when they talk about um, fading NASA infrastructure. I think there was a NASA Academies report, but I mean, um, nobody seems interested in funding, in investing in infrastructure, um, to expand the capabilities or to make or to increase the cadence. And I think again this goes back to something where again you now have two multi-billionaires verging on being trillionaire type of people. We're talking about Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos can spend more money, or maybe that's not the right way of putting it. They are spending more research and development money on their eventually crew-rated spacecraft and rockets than Congress is right now. So the so Congress is perfectly happy to keep their programs and fund those if somebody else is going to build the replacement on their own dime, so to speak. It wouldn't be a dime, it'd be like on their own dollar or some other thing. But if Musk and Bezos are going to build the replacements and use their own money for it, Congress is not going to stand in the way. And so they're at least the way it is right now, as I said, they will keep this system and keep operating it until those systems are ready to start flying. Actually, it isn't before they're ready to start flying. Once they are flying people, then and passengers, then they will shut off these. I assume they would shut these programs off at that point because they are expensive. So the let's see, a couple more here. I'm gonna try and go relatively close to checkout time here, but I am checking out a little bit, but I will have to stop before I get too close so that I can check out before checkout time ends. Let's see, who is able to call a launch abort from mission control? I'm not sure the full list. Obviously, the crew can do that. The flight director on console can do that. Um, but I mean, it's not like they're in consultation with lots of people, and so there would be a recommendation that would probably come to them unless we're in a in a particular time crunch. If something happens very quickly and they don't have time to consult, then they have to make that call. But um, the thing is, for a lot of these, for extreme for the most dangerous parts of the mission, an abort is going to be automated. It's going to the software is going to figure that out faster than any person can react. So um, the question is Gateway canceled? No. So again, what happened is the White House proposed canceling most of the Artemis program. So they proposed canceling Gateway. The SLS upgrades were, so the Gateway and SLS upgrades immediately, and then also the programs themselves. So Exploration Ground Systems, Orion, and SLS at the end of next year, at the end of 2027. But they only proposed that, and then what happened is Congress, we weren't sure what Congress was going to do from a political standpoint, and this is back in the spring of last year. So a lot's happened since then, and one of the first things they did in when they finally sort of revealed what they were going to do was they very quietly rejected, since Congress is controlled by the same party, they quietly rejected that proposal, and they actually provided immediate funding for Gateway through, I believe, through 2028, and for the SLS upgrades through 2029. So the Gateway is still a thing, and the SLS upgrades are still a thing, and they basically are where we are right now. Is it it seems like the current architecture with Orion, SLS, and Gateway was extended through Artemis 5, and that's currently scheduled for right after the beginning of the next decade in early 2030. But I don't know how realistic that date is. It's an old date, and we just they just quietly just quietly changed the date on the Artemis 3 homepage, for instance, to the end of 2028. Well, that's already past the current scheduled date for Artemis 4. So um, we have not seen all of the dominoes that are falling yet, but that suggests Artemis 5 is well out into the next decade, and so that stuff is going to be that stuff's going to be funded. It is already funded through, in some cases, through the end of this presidential term. And so again, really, what it's going to come down to is, and something that we're watching very intently, is because, as I said, Musk and Bezos are building the replacements. I don't know that that's their primary purpose. They're commercial systems or commercial services to fly passengers beyond Earth orbit. Especially Starship has been that way forever, but the New Glenn rocket would possibly provide the opportunity to fly Orion, and could be a replacement for SLS, but they're not there yet. And so as I say all the time, the question is when you have the level of financial commitment that they're making, it increases the chances that they're going to succeed, and it also suggests that it's going to happen, on a sooner than later. It's just we're talking about for this race with China, we're talking about end of 2028. That's just not that much time in terms of this type of ambition, and trying to start flying people back to the moon, and trying to start flying people farther than that. So, um, the thing, and the flip side of it is, if Congress continues to invest in the current architecture with Orion and SLS at these levels, they're not going to. It's going to be very difficult for them to increase their launch cadence, and so they're going to be in a position where there there is going to be an opportunity to replace them for the foreseeable future. And so as soon as somebody takes advantage of that opportunity, then it becomes very difficult to justify the expense for this. it's just not a competitive system. Um, but it's also still right at the moment a capability that nobody else has. And so that's the flip side of that, which is that the government's going to continue to sustain this system financially until somebody flies a replacement and flies passengers to the moon. So and that's also the case with Gateway. Gateway is a part of that architecture. I think, again, we're hearing Jared Isaacman in the White House talk about a lunar base. I think that's their alternative to Gateway, is to rather than rather than build an architecture and build infrastructure in orbit around the moon, build it on the surface. And so everybody, instead of having people in orbit, everybody goes to the surface and they work there. So um, the yeah, and then again, so as I was just saying, so um, we'll see. Again, that will absolutely, when when either Starship or whatever systems Blue Origin um, demonstrates, when they demonstrate a crew rated capability either for the rocket or the spacecraft or both, then it's going to be a question of whether would Congress continue to spend that money on these systems when you have something that is being designed to fly at a much higher cadence, and would come at much less cost to the government to just rent. It's like renting a taxi versus or renting a car versus owning a car. So, and I believe that well, and so then to finish the thought, would they really do that? I that it the I think people I think uh, the assumption is that they wouldn't. But then I guess it's worth pointing out, nobody's ever reached that point. Nobody has reached that point yet, and so it is still I am still speculating on something that hasn't happened yet. It doesn't mean that it's not going. It The chances of it happening are still pretty good, but it's the question of when. And so, but right now it's a capability that could be replaced, but has not yet. So, um, my understanding uh, about the Blue Origin, the systems for the Blue Origin, for their lunar architecture, for their cislunar architecture. Obviously, the lunar lander will be crew rated. Um, they and my understanding is that everything is being designed. You get into a little bit of a gray area with this hybrid approach for Artemis III, but the Mark II architecture is being designed to crew rating standards, or human rating standards. At least that's my understanding. So, um, but that system's not going to be available in theory until Artemis 5. And again, we're not hearing anything really from SpaceX or Blue Origin about what their plans are. And even NASA, Jared Isaacman was asked about that yesterday, um, and that is something that I'll come back to in the next video. But he he acknowledged the existence of alternate plans, but he did not describe them, and maybe he can't. I don't know if he's under non-disclosure agreement or not. Those are private system, private. It's private development. It's private commercial development, and that typically is secret. It's up to those companies to, um, it's up to those companies to provide some information about that. I don't know where the line is drawn in terms of what NASA is going to what NASA's able to disclose. It doesn't mean that they can't disclose. It doesn't mean that either SpaceX or Blue Origin or NASA can't disclose things like schedules, for instance, but they don't. These programs, unfortunately, continue to just be, they continue to be, they're as secretive as the Chinese are, and those programs. So again, we know the pieces that they're making. So like we know the Chinese are making a lunar crew transport spacecraft, a lunar lander, and a rocket, but we don't know. We have no idea about their. We just heard a schedule for those, which is something else that I'll come back to. But we don't really have interim milestones or a roadmap to getting to those milestones, and we don't know. So we don't know the status of that development in any with any level of any degree of detail, and that applies to Blue Moon and it applies to Starship the same way. So, um, we're waiting for more information. Um, because these it is not the kind of development where it's necessarily self-evident what type of progress that they're making. So for some type of technology, so for instance for Starship, they're the recoverability and the reusability of the system, you can see the progress there. That is self-evident, but they haven't gotten to propellant transfer yet. And I'm not sure because that's not something that happens. Um, it's not as easy necessarily to see that when we get to that. And so I'm going to be very curious what type of coverage we get and what level of disclosure we get for that for those technical demonstrations. And then similarly for Blue Origin, their cargo lander, the Mark One lander, we did get an update about that they just finished direct field acoustic testing, but I don't know that they've necessarily given us a schedule. For instance, like when is it going to barge to Houston? When are those thermal vacuum tests going to occur? What's the launch date for that? So, um, and it's not illegal. That they are perfectly within their rights to be secretive. And and if you look at both of these companies kind of come out of a computer and software ethos, and that's the way most of those companies operate. Um, the development is not done in public or is not shared on a regular basis. So, um, unfortunately, we're stuck because the thing is that the there it beating the Chinese is not necessarily a commercial goal for either of those systems. They don't necessarily need to land by a particular date in order for them to be financially successful. And then um, you can see the possibility of SpaceX going public is obviously definitely based on Falcon and Starlink and Dragon, but it's also based on the promise of Starship. And so they're able to raise money and successfully finance themselves without whether or not they land on the moon by the end of 2028. And similarly for Blue Origin, they're able to finance themselves and be competitive in the market because there aren't that many people who are, there isn't a large market for landing people on the moon by the end of 2028. So um, yeah, we'll just again, it's absolutely gonna be very interesting to watch this year and beyond how much the progress that they make. And to be fair to Ryan and SLS, they are trying to speed up the schedules there too. It's just within the constraints of government, a government operation. There's a lot more regulation. There's a lot more um, bureaucracy. It's hard. It's just it evolves at a much slower pace. And so if you're doing something that you've done over and over and over, and you've got something down pat, so to speak, then they can be more productive. But this is still, there's still work to do after Artemis II to get to Artemis III. And so they're obviously looking into that, but that's again another one of those questions: is do you wait? Um, if this mission flies in February or close to February, then that's early 2026. There's no guarantee that the lunar landers are going to be ready at the end of 2028, and so um, if it if that pushes into 2029, that's 3 years away. Do you wait another 3 years to fly the last SLS? And then again, what does that do to the Artemis 4 and Artemis 5 schedules? So there, a lot of the questions that I've kind of thrown out there rhetorically have not been addressed yet, and I'm not sure when they're going to be. I would say the best guess right now would be after this mission. And as I've said, if this mission if they were to have a clean mission, relatively clean mission, and did not have a lot of things to clean up after this in terms of refurbishing the mobile launcher, in terms of adjustments and modifications that they need to make to SLS or Orion, then maybe they could fly sooner than later. But then maybe you maybe look at what are your options for. Is there an option to fly without the lunar lander sooner, or do you still just wait for the lunar lander? Um, and then again, that's why we're interested in the progress of Starship and Blue Moon, either whatever this Mark 1 derivative or Mark 1/Mark 2 derivative architecture is. That's why we're interested in that, because um, it, you can't make that choice about what flight you're going to fly or when you're going to fly it until you have some level of or some understanding of what kind of progress they're making. And so are they not going to, what are they going to say about those private programs? Are they just going to say that they're delayed? And that's basically all they said in October is, and all that they've really said about Starship isn't really when they're going to be ready to do something or when they're going to hit any of these milestones. They just said it's not mid 2027 anymore. It's and by 2028, which means by the end of 2028. At least is what my understanding of it is. You can use that phrase to me. That phrase can be interpreted. It's vague. They could be a lot more. They could be a lot more. Even mid 2027 is less vague than by 2028. So. But we'll see. It doesn't, just because they're being vague and just because they're being secretive, that doesn't say anything about how much progress they're making. It just means we don't have any idea about what progress they're making. So, we will just have to see when Starship flies again and when the Mark 1 lander flies. And then the New Glenn part of it is increasing the launch cadence of that rocket as well, because they will need to fly. Again, we do hear rumors about this possible Artemis III architecture for Blue Moon, but nothing concrete. So anyway, let's see. So I guess again, if anybody has any more questions, otherwise I guess we'll just say. I'll have to figure out what I'm going to do next in terms of if it's going to be a live stream or a video. I really want to kind of catch up on a few of these big things and at least kind of summarize some of the things that I've been talking about here. But just to summarize what we heard and what we maybe not learned, but what we heard this week about Artemis 3. But also mostly what the situation is with Artemis 2. But that is going to be what we're going to be watching very closely in the next, certainly for the rest of this month and probably for the first 2 weeks of February, if not a little bit longer. But we're going to be watching to see when they complete these milestones that we know about, which is the pad testing. So I'm talking about the milestones to get to the point where they're ready to do this wet dress rehearsal tanking test, which is basically it is the highest fidelity uh, test of a launch that you can do without launching. And so um, they're going to, but to get to there, they need to set up. They're validating pad connections. They're setting up the emergency egress system. We're watching. Those are the things that we're watching for first. Um, we'll be we'll be watching to see if they start doing when they start doing crew access arm swing tests. If this is the angle we're going to get on the live stream, you should at least be able to see that, so you can kind of see where the arm is currently more or less fully extended up against the spacecraft launch abort system. And so if you can't see it, that means it's either that it's probably most of the way retracted. Um, and then we're going to be looking for updates on when they do the pad the pad RF testing, the program specific engineering test, the PSETs. When they do the booster servicing, we'll probably need to hear some sort of a confirmation when that's completed. Um, and another thing that we'll be looking for, this isn't the greatest angle for it, is we'll be looking for them to position the side flame deflectors and the extensible columns underneath the mobile launcher. So a little bit down here, it might be hard to see with the framing of this shot. So maybe it would be nice if we could get a different angle. I liked the angle that we had during Artemis 1 was from the east looking west, so it was over here looking in that direction. And that's not an arrow, but looking from right to left. So that'll be, but that's a relatively that's a not necessarily set it and forget it, but they will, once they put that in place, that can stay there for both the wet dress rehearsal and the launch. And then I'm assuming we're going to see some footage of the crew when they do this walk down. Hi, Chris, if that really is you, Chris. Sorry about giving a Philip answer on your live stream. But I'm doing a lot of that here. um, so, but we're going to be looking for a few of those signposts, so to speak, tea leaves for when they're ready to do the wet dress rehearsal. Hopefully, we're going to get notification when they actually start the countdown for the wet dress rehearsal, and we'll know. Hopefully, we will know before that they're ready to do that. And my understanding is that they're going to do a pre-test briefing for that, and then a post-test briefing. Pardon me. And so I also understand that they're planning on doing that. That they're targeting the T0 for that at night. So sort of lining up with the launch windows that they're talking about for the nights of the 6th through the 10th in February. So but that's really what we're looking for, is we're looking to get some sort of an estimate on when the wet dress rehearsal, when they're ready to do that. And part of the way we would learn that is for them to give us a few clues about here's the work that we've completed, and here's the work that's left. And so I've run through some of those things here in this live stream, and I will be running through them again. And so let me see if they're the only one of the other things that I was going to just throw out there, because one of the questions that I had going into this was answered in the Artemis II press kit that was released on, was that really? No, it was released on Friday night, I guess. Another one of those Friday night dumps, but it's really good. It's really detailed. It's not in PDF format, unfortunately, but I guess you can print it to PDF. But let me go ahead and let me see if I can pull that up, because the question I had was about the differences in what we're going to hear in that terminal countdown, that final 10 minutes of the countdown, in terms of the things that you're going to hear because there's a crew there. When do they ask the crew to close and lock their visors? When does the crew access arm retract? And when is the launch abort system armed? And that at that point, then they could do a pad abort if they need to. So those were obviously not, they weren't, um, the launch abort system wasn't even active. And so that they just weren't possibilities for Artemis 1. And there was, that was the uncrewed demo for this system. So um, I'm going to break away from that for a moment and just search for. I don't even know if I need to. I don't even know if I need to put in NASA, but the there's a really good countdown timeline in here. Um, and they actually also gave us a little bit of a timeline for the mission. But you know, I am still interested in I am still interested in uh, I am still interested in more detail than that, of course. But I'll quickly run through this, but like I said, I'm going to need to run through this multiple times myself. Again, I one of the again one of those sort of bigger picture coverage things that's unfortunate, but just it is what it is. Is that what it sounds like NASA is going to do for this quote unquote coverage of the wet dress rehearsal is they're it sounds like they're going to provide video feeds to the media that are that have fiber, so to speak, from NASA at Kennedy Space Center. They're going to provide fiber feeds to them, and they're obviously going to also they're going to at least have a live feed like they have right now of the vehicle like this, but they're not going to provide live commentary. They're only going to provide social media updates. They did, they said they were going to provide detailed updates, but I mean, what we'd be interested in it would be this level of detail. I don't know that they're going to talk about um, things like NASA test director briefing. And again, for those of you who are familiar with shuttle, the NTD briefing. No, that's not going to work. Let me do. Let's do a different color. So the NTD briefing in shuttle was in the hold at T minus 20 minutes. We won't hear that regardless, but we'll just have to hope. There was as much pushback as I think we could give. I made pretty much the same case to the public affairs point of contact about the what not providing live commentary means that we're going to be drinking from the fire hose in the final 10 minutes of the launch count. And so one of the things they said to us about why they wouldn't provide coverage was um, they consider the wet dress rehearsal to be practice, and that they need the practice and the dress rehearsal for themselves to get ready to cover the launch. But that's my point to them. What about us? We're covering the launch too. Just like NASA spaceflight and other media are covering the launch. There will be a lot of people watching the NSF live stream, and I think I saw a quick thing yesterday that there were at least as many, if not more, people watching the NSF live stream than the NASA one. And so, not the greatest thing for us to have to walk into that terminal countdown not completely unprepared, but just um, we could be better prepared with more information, and we're just unfortunately not going to get it. And so sorry, that's my quick rant on that. Um, the so again, coming back to the close and lock your visors, and so this is this sequence here. So um, The we heard the launch director poll. Uh, that's Charlie Blackwell Thompson. She polls. She's the last poll. She doesn't poll the launch team. She polls management. Um, so she'll poll the management. She'll give her go to continue, and then and that says L minus 16 here, and so that's where we'll hear the call to close and lock your visors. I believe that's going to come from the Orion test conductor. They end up with the same call signs. So in shuttle days, that was the orbiter test conductor. I believe that's who it's going to come from. Um, Again, it would be nice to it'd be nice to have heard, for instance, the audio for the countdown demonstration test, to just again to be better prepared. But that's where that would be, and then crew access arm retract is at, and I sort of the crew access arm retract is at T minus 8 minutes. And then the LAS is armed down here at 5 minutes 20 seconds. So in this case, they actually identify the position that's going to notify the crew, and that will be the NASA test director. So the launch abort system will be armed at T minus 5 minutes 20 seconds, and that's when pad abort capability will become live. And so those are differences from the Artemis 1 launch. If you'll recall from Artemis 1, the crew access arm was retracted, I think, before the countdown started. But this time it needs to be able to move expeditiously in both directions. And that'll be something that we'll be watching for in the wet dress rehearsal. It should be done in both cases, because the wet dress rehearsal will end um, with a scrub. It's just a planned scrub. It's also a planned cutoff, safing, and then eventually a scrub. So um, as we get closer to the wet dress rehearsal, I'm probably going to have to do that in live stream format as well. But I do want to go through. They reviewed the timeline for what they were planning to do in the wet dress rehearsal, and what I'm talking about there are they're planning on doing 2 terminal countdown runs with testing unplanned hold capability in the first run, testing recycle capability, um, and then coming back and testing the capability to make a second terminal countdown run within a 2-hour launch window. And so that would be a little bit of a different contrast from like the shuttle days where you only had a 10-minute launch window. This is going back to the really old school shuttle days where they would have hours long launch windows, and they could, well, maybe not hours long, but they had the ability to um, cut off inside 9 minutes, recycle back to 9 minutes, and try and get the vehicle ready for a second launch attempt before the launch window ended. They have that capability here theoretically. They've just never tested it with a real launch vehicle, and they wanted to do that in Artemis 1. They weren't able to do it. They're going to try and do it this time. Um, and so that to me would also be something that would be very useful to have some understanding about, because it isn't something where the clock will recycle back to 10 minutes relatively quickly, probably within maybe the first half hour after a recycle. But they won't be ready to pick up the clock that quickly. It'll probably take them at least an hour, and we don't really have any idea about what we should be looking for. It's the same complaint I have about Starship and Blue Origin and Blue Moon, except on a much smaller time scale. We don't really have any idea what to be looking for or listening for um, during a recycle. Um, so even if it's, there will be somebody providing live commentary during a launch count, um, but again, we just don't know what level of context they're going to be able to provide. And so, as opposed to just listening to the countdown loop and the launch team, that would be the ideal thing. That's what we used to be able to do in the shuttle days. But of course, now you've got export control and limited data rights, and so NASA's not fully secret like the commercial companies, but they are becoming more and more commercial and more secret. So, um, but that is one thing I did want to quickly, well, quickly is the wrong word, but that's one thing I wanted to quickly stop and talk about before I sign off here. I'll just bring this up again. Let's see, and see if there are any. Um, I guess I can try and bring up see see if I can, there's a quick, uh, couple of quick questions. Will there be cockpit cameras during launch? There will be feeds. We got a little bit of an informal um, idea about what we might see. I can't say too much about it, but I guess the way I would put it, they're going to try and show something, but I don't know I don't know how much we're going to get. We'll just have to see. But they did. If you saw some of the B-roll, the edited video footage that NASA released from the countdown demonstration test, I think it was the last one they released. Um, we did see a couple of views from cameras inside. So there's one sort of low resolution one that's sitting behind the commander and pilot, and you can see the crew displays. Um, and then there was one that looked like it was kind of positioned um, in the docking tunnel, looking down, and you could see the two mission specialists. In that case, it looked like it was a little closer to Jeremy Hansen in the I believe that's the mission specialist one seat, and then Christina Cook is closer to the hatch in the MS2 seat. Um, those views are available. It's just a question of what they're going to show because um, I'm not sure what we're going to get during launch. It doesn't sound like we're necessarily going to get anything from the SLS. I guess the way I would put it, um, they are not, they aren't willing to show dark views. I guess, I guess you have to pick your poison whether you want to show some graphics versus um, and renders versus whatever you're getting live from the vehicle. I guess I would reserve judgment. I was kind of disappointed that they didn't do that. I would like to see the footage from Artemis One, and of course they never released it. Again, talking about being secretive and not being secretive, they never released the full Artemis One footage from the onboard the cameras that are mounted to the exterior of the core stage or to the exterior of the Orion. I believe it was. I believe there's one that's on the Orion crew module adapter, looking down. We did see edited parts of that, but again, there's parts of it that are just unfortunately. Um, I don't know how else to describe it except secret. So, um, hopefully, we will get a little bit more of that this time. But we're. I'm just not sure when and when in the flight we're going to get a lot of that. Um, they're supposed to be relatively busy, and we will get once they get on orbit, once the solar arrays are deployed, we'll get those cameras again. We did see a little bit of that during the first orbit of Artemis One, where the vehicle was still close to Earth. Let's see. So yeah, we're just so yeah. I think the so I guess that's probably the best way to wrap up here. Then I have to go check out of the hotel. The so right now the we don't have a date for the wet dress rehearsal. The time range we were given was late January. Again, we heard Marcia Dunn in the pre-rollout briefing mentioned February 2nd. That's one of the dates we've heard. The other date was January 31st. But they aren't. I don't know if that really means that that's a range of dates that they're shooting for. Um, but that's what we're looking for here. And I mean the 31st is less than 2 weeks away. So we're not talking about it very much time. But then they also have to get all that work done in that time. And then for the launch, the opportunity doesn't change, and that's why there's a little bit of uncertainty about whether they will be ready to go in that. The opportunity to launch is opens on the night of February 6th and it closes on the night of February 10th, with the launch window being again slightly across midnight into the next date. But they have to be ready within those 5 days and be ready to make launch attempts within those 5 days. And so we're just waiting. As I said, we're waiting to see the progress of the work of the vehicle at the pad. I'm sure that they're working today. Um, but we're waiting to see those things. And I will, next time, either next video or next time I come back, I will talk about. I'll let you know what I know in terms of um, what work's been completed, what's next, and I don't know that they're going to say. I think that's going to sort of be kept. That 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 estimate is going to be held relatively close, unfortunately. Um, but as I was saying earlier, I would prefer I at least prefer for them to give us more frequent updates on what work they've completed. When they complete something, let us know. What you know, what did you just finish? What step did you just finish? What's the next step? Um, because that by itself would give us some idea about how well they're, you know, are they ahead of schedule? Are they behind schedule? Or are they on schedule? Um, those are going to be questions we're going to be asking regardless. So, um, but that's kind of where we are right now. Um, I see the question about Starship holding up Artemis 3. Um, I mentioned this earlier. I'll just quickly say the Artemis 3 homepage was updated to align with the White House policy, which is by 2028, which is by the end of 2028. So as far as we understand, Starship is supposed to be has a chance. Okay, and as I talk, we are seeing one of the crew access arm swings. They're doing a retraction test. Um, and as I mentioned before, the reason that they're doing that is this is a new capability. They had to beef up the hydraulic system to be able to drive the arm through both of these motions. And but again, for Starship, I guess the way to put it is, even though we never really got any sort of confirmation about it, um, if Artemis 3 was going to fly in mid 2027, then yes, Starship would at least have been one of the things that would have held up Artemis 3. If it's not going to fly until the end of 2028, then Starship, there's still a I'm not sure how you necessarily carry it, but Starship definitely has a chance to make that date. Um, but we just aren't getting enough information to really say, to make any type of qualitative, because really what I would want to know is, okay, so you're saying there's a chance, the old line. So but how much of a chance, how good of a chance do they have, and why? So again, we don't know the schedule, we don't know any of the milestones, um, with any specificity. And then really, just like everything else, same thing with Orion and SLS. I mean, I could say the same thing about the Artemis 3 Orion and the Artemis 3 SLS core stage. We have a vague idea about when those are supposed to be completed and delivered to NASA from the contractors, but um, we don't really know um, how good of a chance they have of making the dates that we're aware of. For Orion, that would be end of this year is what Lockheed Martin is shooting for delivery, and then Boeing with the SLS core stage for Artemis 3. I'm not really sure what they're shooting for there, but we at least have an idea of the last. We're supposed to see the the core stage, the final mate of all the elements of the core stage, um, basically by mid-year. And so that at least gives us that gives us something to keep an eye out for. We are getting some imagery of the assembly of that, but um, we just don't have as good of an idea about what to look for, and or just for them to just spill the beans and tell us, give us a schedule, give us a roadmap. And you could say the same thing for, in fact, for Blue Origin. We know even less. So we don't even know what their Artemis 3 plan is, let alone what their schedule is for either the lunar landers or for the New Glenn launch vehicle itself, because the New Glenn is going to be launching other payloads. So a lot of waiting and seeing. So um, let's see. All right. So what I'm going to do is, just for grins, I'm kind of curious since that retraction of the crew access arm was relatively quick. I don't know that that would necessarily be the speed that we would see it retracted during the terminal count, but it maybe that looked like it only took um, a couple of minutes. I'm just kind of curious to see because in an emergency case, it would need to be extended faster than that. It probably would need to be back in place within um, half a minute, if not faster. So we'll just hang on for a minute here, but not too long, um, because I would imagine that they're going to extending the arm, so the opposite direction from where it is now to fully extended. So, um, for instance, let's say you had a fire or like a hydrogen leak, the possibility of they simulated when they did a simulation of an emergency, they what the sim case they used was a hydrogen leak, and so the idea would be if you had that for some reason come up when the crew access arm was retracted, it would need to be extended very quickly, and the crew would need to they'd start running the fire extinguisher, the Fire X system on the mobile launcher, so they'd be showering the whole mobile launcher with water, and they need to extend the crew access arm. The crew would need to open the hatches, get out, and go across to the slide wires and take those baskets down to the terminus area. So, um, and they, you don't want to waste a lot of time there. I think they would probably want to be able to, just like if you think about an emergency evacuation of an airplane, they talk about wanting to have a much larger number of people off of a jumbo jet in probably less than 3 minutes. So you'd probably be looking at something less than that. Although there is a little bit of a, the thing about the Orion hatch. I'm not sure how quickly they can open that, but um, just going to hang on here for a couple more minutes here just to see if we see a test extension. I would imagine though that they're going to try and do um, they're going to try and do some of that today. It's just that it may take a little longer than that, but y'all can keep watching this. I'll have to watch some of this a little bit later. Um, but for a little bit of extra context, the um, this is the way that the mobile launcher was rolled out yesterday with the crew access arm retracted. They extended it. I think somebody said, I can't remember what the time was, but it was extended after sunrise this morning. And so now they've done a full cycle of it, a full extension and a full retraction of it. And they'll probably be doing a little bit more testing of it throughout the day today. So so there's a question here about Falcon Heavy or a Starship with an expendable upper stage. Um, I think Falcon Heavies, as baseline, a fully expendable Falcon Heavy could send um, could send, I think, on the order of 15 metric tons to the moon, and so that might be enough for a lunar lander, but it might not. But then you could also use the same type of idea that Starship and New Glenn are supposed to evolve to, which is Earth orbit refueling or Earth orbit rendezvous. So maybe you couldn't launch a lunar lander with one Falcon Heavy. Maybe you could do it with two, or maybe you could launch the lander with the Falcon Heavy, and you could launch um, an expendable upper stage on a Falcon 9. Um, that maybe that would be, I don't know if that would be enough, but if you couldn't launch it with one Falcon 9, maybe you could launch two Falcon 9s. If you could see, obviously, with the Falcon 9, the single stick for sure, you can see what kind of launch cadence they have with that. It's just a question of the mission risk you have from a lot of rendezvous and dockings and designing a system to handle that. So um, the one of the things about the Apollo lunar module that is worth pointing out is it was designed to a lower standard, lower safety standards. And I mean that it's probably not fair to state it that way. I think maybe the way that a better way of stating it would be um, under those circumstances, in that era, they were willing to take more risk. Um, and again, I like to think of it as, again, 1969 was less than was well just about a quarter of a century after World War II, and the first half of the 20th century was had two world wars in it, and so you had that was a generation of people that were much more um, unfortunately familiar with uh, death. I don't know how else to put it. They were I don't know that they tolerated or accepted it, but it was much more a part of their of lives now. There's a lot less tolerance for unnecessary risk, but then that also means that they're not, you're not necessarily trying to figure out what, the problem is that if you step over that line, somebody gets hurt. And so that's, I think, if you listen to the way that they're talking about these missions, safety is the most important thing, even above and beyond achieving the mission objectives. And so that's the choice that I think that's the choice I think that's being made now, and I think most people are okay with that. But then that also comes with um, having higher standards for safety. And what that means is you're going to have a beefier structure for the vehicle. It's going to be bigger. It's going to be heavier. It's going to require more propellant to get it from one place to another. And so you need larger launch vehicles to do that, or you need multiple launch vehicles to do that. So that there's different ways to do it. But I think it's um, there's only there's only 3 years left. Um, just a little bit less, but call it 3 years to get to achieve this goal. And so um, that's, I guess, one way you could do it. Is to increase the level of acceptable risk, but that's something else that everybody's going to have to buy into. So it's probably not it's not just a question of lift capability, although it does come back to that because safer, you need more, you need a more you need a higher margins of safety, basically. um, and so yeah, we'll see. We'll see. We'll see. I think because I do think eventually Starship and Blue Moon will those systems um, will eventually reach their stated capability. I don't know that it's necessarily going to be in the next 3 years, but as I was saying, um, they have different motivations for what they're trying to do. Um, Congress is the one that uh, wants to have the next lunar landing in the next 3 years. So okay, so I don't see. I think we're going to just have to wait a little longer for the next, for perhaps the next cycle of the crew access arm, and also keep on the lookout up here to see. You might not see. Those are where the emergency egress system baskets will end up being. Um, keep an eye out for either being able to see the lines for that, or seeing the baskets themselves get um, towed or pulled up those lines to get in place. So those will be visible things that we can look out for in the next, maybe day or two. And then obviously we'll be watching to see what we hear from NASA over the next few days after today, since today is a weekend. Everybody out here is kind of catching their breath after a long day yesterday, and except for the folks that are working out there today. But again, thanks for everybody for stopping by. Thanks for the eyeballs. Thanks for tuning in. I will try to. I'll try and come back and do more as it's just as I said before. Um, this is there's a faster turnaround for live streams. It's again, but it takes me, it takes me 2 hours to say something in these versus maybe 20 minutes for a recorded video. Um, but you know, I'll try and post an update next time, for the next live stream or in the next video, and keep you guys posted. And if you want, join the channel for more coverage. I'll probably be doing more member live streams in the next week, and and I'll try and put out a video. As I mentioned, I spoke with the lead closeout crew member. His name's Taylor Hose. You might have seen him on social media. Um, and so he gave me a lot of details about what the closeout crew is going to be doing, and so I will be trying to put a video out of that because it was very interesting because that was something I was not aware of that they're doing for the wet dress rehearsal, which is um, there will be people out at the launch pad after the vehicle is in stable replenish, and the closeout crew is going to do the full Orion closeout. They just won't be doing it with the crew inside, and so that will be interesting. Um, and one of those other unfortunate things that we won't get if we don't get live commentary is we won't get a play-by-play of what's going on in the White Room while that's going on. But I hope we get to see some of that while it's happening. So I'll go ahead and sign off, and that's definitely what we're going to be looking for in the next couple of weeks is when does the wet dress rehearsal when are they ready for the wet dress rehearsal? And so keep an eye on the NASA live stream. Keep an eye on the NASA spaceflight live streams. Um, I haven't had a chance to check both of them, but I would imagine that the views it's from a similar vantage point, but you can check out either version of them. I actually think the NSF live streams will probably do a better job of um, making sure the lighting is kept. It matches the lighting conditions. The camera settings match the lighting conditions, but um, we will be watching to see what we get, and I will come back when I can, um, and I'll be home hopefully tomorrow, and I can start to sort of sift through some of the things, some of the video and pictures and information that I got during the trip. So again, thanks everybody, and I will see you next time.